Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Airspeed's Korra Rewatch video. And this one's going to be for K214 Light in the Dark, the finale for Book 2 Spirits. And I'm really excited to talk about this one. Watching this episode again was just so exciting. The grin on my face watching it again, obviously knowing all of the big moments coming up, and them still hitting kind of just as hard, and I just love this episode. It's just good scene after good scene, big moment, meaningful moment, changing the kind of course in a way of the series, really impactful moments, and only really I think one moment in like the entire episode, one scene in the entire episode that to me doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You probably know, I think I've alluded to what that scene is for like more or less the entirety of book 2 and probably a little bit of book 1, and we'll get to that, but everything else was just, you know, home run after home run. It's one of my favorite episodes of the entire series. That includes Avatar and like the comics and stuff like that. I think there's some really amazing stuff in this episode, and I think rightfully so the creators deserve a lot of praise for this, because this is, you know, just in terms of what's happening here, it's the most like, you know, world is at stake finale that we've had so far. This is, you know, bigger than the Avatar The Last Airbender finale, and the stakes feel that big with what they do and how they do it. And I love how that because this is such a, I suppose, a lore-centric season, because we've learned so much about the spirit world, the Avatar, it all sort of comes together, and they use these mechanics that they've sort of teased you with, just explain some of them directly to you, and then you can kind of like infer and imply a lot of stuff based on what was already said, and it really, I think, all comes together very nicely here. But yeah, let's get into this, and we'll jump straight in with where we start off. Just getting things in place of like healing Mako and Bolin, healing Korra, and catching us up, I suppose, with, after the last episode, just how bad things are. Korra's reaction to, in her mind, I suppose, failing as the Avatar, losing Rava, acknowledging that the cycle is now over, basically, that, you know, with Rava gone, the Avatar won't reincarnate again because the spirit part has now been separated from the cycle, and it won't kind of come back again like that. It would require merging again, like we see. And it's really interesting, like just hearing her say the line that, you know, I'm the last Avatar, and kind of feeling at that point that like this amazing thing which I've just learned the whole history of 10,000 years is going to end on my watch. It's a really kind of tragic moment, and because of how meaningful it is to be the Avatar to Korra, how much she kind of defines herself by that, it completely sets up this amazing little arc here for her of like feeling like she's completely failed, it's over, they've lost, darkness is going to take over the world, and now is the time for Tenzin to step up, not as a spiritual mentor, as an airbending teacher, but just a mentor, a friend almost. That's the sort of level of the advice here. It's just something he learned in the last episode. He's changing it a bit, but the core of it is here. Don't try and kind of like define yourself as something else, or define yourself just based on one thing. And the core of it here is that Korra feels she's failed and is sort of given up in a way, because she feels that like she has failed as the Avatar and there's nothing to fight with. But it's her kind of only seeing herself as the Avatar, not acknowledging Korra the person, only ever seeing herself as Korra the Avatar. And now with the Avatar part gone, the sense of feeling like all the power, the heroic kind of aspect of her is gone. And I love how once they get into the Tree of Time, I really like how they reference Wan, because we've had Unalaq criticize Wan's decision to kind of keep the portals closed, but then they come back around here and actually explain that, look, Wan was the Avatar, but and while yes, he is known for being the Avatar, the first Avatar, and what he accomplished having the power of Rava, but he would never have gotten to that position if it wasn't for who he was as a person before all of that. The Avatar came into being fundamentally because of Wan, the character, and the friendship he developed with Rava, and the trust that developed between the two of them to the point where they did merge. But fundamentally, his personality and who he was suited to the role that the Avatar would come to be. And similarly here, it's about teaching Korra that she has power on her own. Korra, the person outside of just being the Avatar, just having all these special powers, is strong as well. And that's where they really give her this inspiration here to use the power of your own spirit. And just acknowledging that for her, that we already know that Jinora going to the spirit world is like, you know, it's her spirit. Korra going to the spirit world is her spirit, but she sees herself so much as the Avatar that she's almost like, Rava is my spirit, when it's a completely separate entity, even though they are merged together until, like, obviously end of last episode. So I think the explanation of the Tree of Time here and bringing up pure cosmic energy again, really, really good reference. And it makes sense in that, like, ultimately, like, cosmic energy is one of the most kind of, like, vague concepts that the series kind of has. But you get it as just at a base level. It is just harnessing, like, the energy that, in a way, like, keeps the universe going. The what keeps life in the whole universe basically going. This is something different than, like, physical energy that powers people and bending. It's different than spiritual energy. It's this separate form of energy that can only be harnessed in very specific situations. The only real explanation we've had of it before is that this is basically what more or less gives the Avatar state kind of quote-unquote unlimited power, and makes it as powerful as it is, if not it's human and spirit as one, harnessing the energy of the universe to create, like, the most powerful being there possibly can be. And I suppose the sort of implication of harmonic convergence is that because it's formed by, like, planetary alignments and stuff like that, that the reason there's so much energy and the talk of harmonic convergence, like, being so energetic, is that, yes, spiritual energy, but I think it's also meant to be interpreted as, like, in a way, pure cosmic energy is kind of, like, fueling the event as well. But here, and especially because, like, the arc goes over the Tree of Time, and then the Tree of Time is what allows you to actually, if you're spiritual or powerful enough, to connect with the pure cosmic energy of the universe. And I love it because it's the scene with Aang in the Guru trying to open that last chakra, but it's Korra on her own without, you know, the Avatar spirit, and it's just her spirituality and connecting her spirit with that energy. And I think the idea here is that the reason, like, everyone doesn't do this is because it's still one of these things about, like, how much energy someone can have passing through their body. So, like, a Tenzin couldn't necessarily do it because, one, he's not overly spiritual, but I also think, like, a Jinora realistically probably couldn't do this technique that Korra does here to anywhere near the level that Korra does, because Korra, being used to the Avatar state, having 4 elements, and Rava inside her, is just used to channeling so much energy through her body that it's why she can power up her spirit to this degree, whereas I think Jinora could probably get a slight boost because she is so spiritual, but there would be, I think, a kind of limit on how powerful she could be. So I really like this scene here because it's what gives a normal person the ability to challenge something on the level of an Unavatu. I suppose, quick side note here to bring up some of the kind of criticism, some of the confusion I think that's at play here, is that Korra is the last Avatar, but she still can bend all 4 elements. I think the interpretation we are meant to take away from everything here is that fundamentally, after the merging of Wan and Rava, the reincarnations of Wan, I think we're sort of meant to interpret by default, have all 4 elements. Because we see Korra airbend jump into the tree, so she still has airbending. And then later on in her kind of spirit form, Giant Korra, we see her use water bending. So immediately it confirms she has 2 elements, and I don't think it makes much sense to just be like, oh well, Rava has the other 2 and she's destroyed, so Korra has 2 elements. I think she has all 4. It's just there was no obvious reason for her to use earthbending or firebending at this point in time. So I definitely interpret it as like Korra still has all 4 elements, that the Avatar has been a thing for so long that the 4 elements are at this point just a part of Wan's kind of reincarnation, who he is. And so each new Avatar is born with that kind of base ability that, to a degree, the core special ability of Wan is that he kind of is in a way like can contain more energy than anyone else, and so has the 4 elements. Because if you interpret it as like, okay, the water bending is her spirit and she's from the water tribe, so that's why she has water bending, because she doesn't use any of the other elements when she's in giant Korra form, but physically she only has air bending within her. It also doesn't make much sense, because then the idea is that if you interpret it that way, that means every Avatar only keeps 1 element on them at once, and it's always switching out between them, which means that when the Avatar dies, 1 element is lost, but kind of gained with like the reincarnation of the other one. And in this case, it doesn't make much sense, because if Korra is left with air, that means that Rava technically, quote unquote, died with earth, fire, and water. And if the cycle were to continue, it'd be into the Earth Avatar, and he'd be born with Earth, and then Rava would have Earth as well, but air will be missing from the equation. So it sort of confuses things a lot to kind of actually interpret it the other way, and it makes much more sense to just be like, look, the reincarnation of Wan just has 4 elements, and that's how it is. Now, whether or not you interpret it as like Wan only reincarnates because of Rava, or reincarnation is a thing, it's just that the Avatar is the most obvious kind of example of being actually able to find the next reincarnation. It's the only sort of known reincarnation cycle. That's, I suppose, up for debate, because I don't think they're ever going to fully explain how exactly the cycle of life in the Avatar universe works in that level of depth. But I love everyone's reaction to kind of Korra going all giant and blue, because it is this shocking thing in that I don't think even Tenzin expected it to be this level of like power. I think he expected like probably Korra to project her spirit out like that and it to be like enhanced, but not to be like giant. And I think that's obviously the whole she's the Avatar, can channel more energy and stuff like that. And the fight that happens here is really, really good. I think it's different. I get to a degree why people have some issue with it, because it's so like suddenly we go into like a kaiju battle more or less. But I think it's cool that it's different. It's this spiritual powers that no one can play a role in. No other bender can play a role in this fight, because the powers that are at play here are just so much beyond that. And the only thing that could oppose Unavatu is something like what happens here, and Korra being the only one, I think, capable of pulling off this giant spirit projection. And I like it because they start off with the firing beams at each other, but I like that Korra herself, her spirit, the way she fights is so physical, and I think that fits her perfectly, that it's her. This is the unique, aspect of like her as the current reincarnation of Wan, because we know each one's different and just have a few traits that are similar across all of them. But one of Korra's key ones is that she's tough, she's physical, and in this case she goes at him and like punches him, like knees him in the face, and kind of basically performs almost wrestling moves on him. I love that, the knee strike, getting him up on her shoulders and basically throwing him into a mountain. It's I think thematically it fits her character, in that I think if it was like the Avatar fighting like this, giant Korra and Rava, I think they'd fight differently, and it would be more flying through the air, elements, craziness and stuff like that, like the Avatar state. But because it's Korra, she takes a very physical approach, and I think that was on purpose, and I really like that. But it's at this point, and I think in the Tree of Time, where they start to set up the mechanics, the lore kind of world building stuff at play here, where she tries to find Rava within Vatu, because when she's meditating in the Tree of Time, that's the scene they repeat over and over again, and the Tree of Time gives them a reason to repeat dialogue that Korra's heard before, because it has all of her memories, and it signifies obviously her getting all of her memories back. And so remembering, find the light in the dark, the explanation she heard in Beginnings about how Rava and Vatu can never truly be destroyed. So she's searching within Vatu for Rava, but doesn't find her because, as I sort of explained in the last review, darkness has kind of taken over so much that Rava is just a tiny, speck of light, and Korra can't see that because there's so much darkness. And it takes what Jinora does to kind of shift things in the balance, I suppose, to allow Korra to actually see Rava and there to be enough light left to even give hope. But of course, the fight turns in Unavatu's favor. We get the dark spirit bending attempt here, and that's when Jinora arrives in. And I think this works. I know some people say, Deus Ex Machina, but you can almost say that about like every single finale of Avatar, where like something along those lines happens. And in this case, I think it's explained well enough of just like balance of light and dark. They've, I think, explained like more than they almost needed to about how that affects the size of Rava versus Vatu. And so this sort of special ability of Jinora's to like keep light spirits around her and now like sort of project that light to, I suppose, enhance this specific area with light to allow Rava to be seen more, to me makes sense. Like, it's a technical explanation that you need, but visually they show it. She has a light spirit with her and just like bursts that energy out, some of it hitting Unavatu, that linking with Rava to make her bigger. It's very, very simple, I think, to understand. And obviously this reinvigorates Korra, and she gets Rava out, and she spirit bends Unalaq. And I think this is a really well done reference of just the technique she learned from Unalaq is what defeats him in the end. She doesn't use the dark one to destroy him. She uses the light one to sort of purify him from her perspective, saving him from just being like taken over basically by this, dark spirit Vatu. And obviously because it's the death of Unalaq, because obviously Unavatu is Unalaq's physical body combined with Vatu and then morphed together. So it's his physical body also kind of being destroyed here. Plus it's the end of the Dark Avatar cycle, if there was even going to be one, because I think Unavatu, the interpretation you're meant to have is that that's basically Dark Avatar state on 100% of the time, because Vatu's in control. So Korra is kind of purifying the human side of the Avatar at the same time as she's purifying Vatu. And so it's both, it's dying in the Dark Avatar state, and that ends that cycle. So we're not going to see a Dark Avatar kind of be reborn over time, which I think is a common thing that comes up. So I felt like this is probably part of why I like book 2 so much, is that it's one of the few times they get technical with sort of how things work, and they get it right. And because I think it's a fair criticism of Mike and Brian that one of the things they seem to struggle with is continuity when it comes to dates and putting time on stuff. They tend to get it wrong a lot of the time when years and stuff like that comes up. So I appreciate them getting this kind of more technical details right, and it working out so well that it can all be explained without having to stretch too far. And so I love the when her saying "go in peace," that this is the person who destroyed the past lives and stuff like that, but it's still her uncle. It's this personal thing of her having to, in this moment here, finish off her uncle and kill him, but from her perspective it's mercy to a degree, and that she's freeing him from this control by Vatu. And I think it's fitting, and it shows a level of maturity of her saying "go in peace." And it sets things up again where it means that over the next 10,000 years, Vatu will be reborn within Rava, because obviously, like, the whole idea is that it can never truly be destroyed, so it will come back. Harmonic convergence will have to be fought again. It's going to be simple, more easier next time. Easier, I didn't need to say more. Easier next time, because there won't be an Unalaq-like figure to kind of stop this. To a degree, it'll be more well known what exactly is going on here. And unless it happens to happen at a time when the Avatar is very, very young, it should be something that is kind of, happens easier. Because Korra even had in the Avatar state, Korra can beat just Vatu on his own, which it would be next time. So just the Avatar has the advantage over Vatu, and that's a clear-cut thing for sure. And then it's just kind of wrapping everything up. It's Jinora going back to her body, Korra and Rava merging again at harmonic convergence, but the confirmation of it's the same cycle, but it's just that Korra is now the beginning of this time, because it's a reincarnation of Korra, but since she's a reincarnation of Wan, it's still the same cycle. It's just it happened to have the first section kind of cut off. And I like that the merging of Rava and Korra, basically the merging of the Avatar for the second time, I like that it's more of a sort of a kind of a beautiful event as opposed to a desperate event like it was in Beginnings, where it was like this desperate kind of touching the portal, merging them together to try and save the world. Here it's just like, this works. We're gonna merge again because they're friends. Rava and the spirit of Wan are friends, and it's just that the Avatar is needed. It works, and I think it's very, very fitting how the scene plays out. And immediately again, it's just transitioning into really good scenes, and eventually to the scene with the portal. But I think just before that we get. We don't forget about Eska and Desna. I really like that Korra goes over to them and apologizes for, the only way was to kill Unalaq. But them understanding that, in the end he had become someone that they really couldn't look up to because of what he wanted to do. And they, I suppose, accept now what everyone else was saying about him. And their focus now is on, I suppose to a degree, comforting their mother, but also that the leadership of the North falls to them. And it also, I think, showed a level of respect from the twins to Korra for more or less the first time. And I just thought it was a nice scene the way it played out. Nothing crazy, but it just worked that they didn't forget about this plot point that you've been setting up for most of the season of just Eska and Desna's loyalty to Unalaq and it beginning to wane, and then them actually caring about him, but him not caring about them, and this being the kind of culmination of it. And then, one of the biggest decisions kind of made by a character in the entire franchise of Korra deciding to keep the portals open. I like that Tenzin is kind of just like, okay, everything will go back to normal, you just close the portals and we'll get out of here. And she hesitates. She's like, what if he was right? What if humans and spirits are meant to live together? And it shows her thinking for herself. Her not just doing the thing because that's the way Avatar 1 would have done it. Her acknowledging that 10,000 years have passed. Things are different now. The spirits coming back into the world, they're not going to be able to take over the world on their own unless Vatu kind of is the one kind of leading it. And so it's better that we get it this way. And then if Vatu ever comes back, if humans and spirits, I suppose the ultimate idea is that if humans and spirits are friends, there'll be more of a resistance to the spirits turning dark if Vatu ever returned and his defeat at harmonic convergence wasn't easy or something like that. But it's her having learned and kind of gained a spiritual point of view, that the stuff that Unalaq said to her, her experiences with what the story of Wan, just in general throughout the final stages of this book, going to the spirit world and everything that's happened, she has her own opinion on things now. And it's her basically taking what I think is meant to be interpreted as Unalaq's ideals before they, I assume at some point, became corrupted. The positive side of Unalaq's ideals, which is that, yeah, I can get the idea, the position that humans and spirits, there should be an attempt. If the Avatar is the bridge between the worlds, should it not be to try and incorporate them back together? But it's also, I think, not meant to criticize Wan's decision. He made the correct decision for his time, that there needed to be separation to allow humanity to just become comfortable again in their own world. And now you can sort of start to reintegrate them both back in together. And it's a big decision, because obviously the speech that kind of comes afterwards gets it across very well. But we'll get to it. But I really do like the decision to keep the portals open. It shows Korra, having learned so much, she truly is a fully realized Avatar at this point. Whereas I think the start of the book was meant to signify that she, has most of the bullet points for being the fully realized Avatar. Control of the Avatar state. She's mastered the 4 elements for the most part. But she was missing, I suppose, true spirituality, and then I think a certain maturity level about just being in a position where she's a pseudo world leader. But I think by the end of this book she has that she doesn't take the decision to keep the portals open lightly, but is aware that harmonic convergence changed some things, that there needs to be an attempt to bring kind of harmony back to not just the physical world but the entire world, both worlds and both kind of species, or whatever way you want to call it. Unfortunately, it's from there we transition into, I think, the one negative scene of the episode. And let's get into this discussion here about the Korra Mako breakup Mark II. And here's what I'll say about this scene. Out of context, this is a perfectly well done scene. In context, it doesn't work. It doesn't work because Korra saying that, I think we both realize that our relationship doesn't work, comes out of nowhere. There is no real justification for this scene really being their final breakup, because I don't think this book did a good enough job at truly getting across that there was something so inherently wrong with the Mako-Korra romantic relationship that it just had to end. That it's this mutual thing where they both just accept, no real disappointments in it, that it's over. Especially when Mako's arc, Korra's arc individually, more or less had them individually resolve both of their issues that led to their breakup. And so, to me, it's a scene that has never worked. It's okay, even in the dialogue that they talk about, basically everything that they say up until Korra says, I don't think this is going to work, we both realize it's not going to work. Everything before that felt okay, you're talking to each other, you're bringing out some of the issues out into the air, you're addressing them, you're talking to each other. This in itself, the fact that you're even having this conversation, sort of proves that you're past what the issue was. And then they just decide to break up anyway. And it's not because I'm some heavy Korra-Sami shipper, not Korra-Sami, sorry, Makora shipper. I think it's a good ship, and I liked it in book 1, and I liked what they did at the start of this book. Obviously, I disagree with how they did a lot of the scenes afterwards, but I don't have an issue with this scene purely because I like Mako and Korra as a couple. I think there's a way to break them up, but I just don't think this was a very effective one. If book 2 is meant to be, in terms of romance, Korra and Mako's breakup for good, that relationship's off the table, book 2 did a horrible job at that. And I don't have any real problem with saying that, because the end result of this is that Mako just suffers as a character and is basically still suffering as a character because of where they go with the result of this scene. Even accepting that they break up here, it's a mutual breakup. They both accept that there were both wrongdoings in this relationship, but they still go down the road of like, Mako suffers to this day from the aftermath of this breakup, and still doesn't feel overly comfortable around either Korra or Asami, despite a couple of scenes that they have in like book 3 and 4. So I think the overall net negative of book 2 is just the one thing they got flat out wrong, was just how they approached Mako and Korra's relationship. I just don't think they, outside of like the first 2 episodes, I don't think they really got it right at all, because I don't think Korrasami was on the table at this point. As much as they may try to retroactively say that it was, I don't think it was. So it just feels like they put the relationship stuff in a just, like, we don't know what we want to do with any of this stuff. Even the Eska and Bolin stuff, they have them separate themselves from each other. Where it's just like, oh, okay, it was heat of the moment, there'll always be something between us, but this relationship won't work. I thought the Eska and Bolin one was actually, it was a well done breakup scene, because I think as much as it was a very strong scene in the last episode, and even what they do with it here, you could tell that it probably wasn't going to be one of these relationships that lasted. Just that, okay, there's a connection between Eska and Bolin if they ever interact again, and that's something to note. But it's not really where both of them are going into the future. And yeah, I suppose getting back to what I was talking about here, Mako and Korra, it just feels like I don't know why they felt the need to do this, because I already explained why I feel it's quite badly done. It's just, I can almost not put into words how poor of a decision this is in terms of like their understanding of what they have done in their arc up to now. How the writers got to this as the breakup. Of like, this is a fine breakup if you had done things in a completely different way. But this breakup does not work for Mako and Korra's relationship that has been presented to us up to now. To me, right up until Korra said, you know, I think we both realized this isn't going to work, I was pretty much convinced that this was going to be their get back together scene. Because everything in the book built to that. Like, the build was that Korra developed kind of personally. Mako understood what it meant to kind of not be listened to. That was kind of the core of his arc, which is sort of, in a way, what was happening in or around the time of their breakup. Plus, their breakup happened over this crazy incident of like a civil war happening. I don't think it really represented too much like personally between them. It was their jobs sort of clashing a bit before they had fully, I suppose, really got into a position where they fully like knew exactly their role on both fronts. Because Mako was still just, you know, a cop, whereas now he's a detective. By the end of the book, Korra understands her role a lot better than she did at the start. So it was like, I think both Mako and Korra at weird personal points in their lives at the time their breakup happened, and they get past those two points, and I just really to this day still don't get why they went the direction that they did with it. And I'll leave it at that. You know, it's not something that I think is just forever this kind of dark mark over the entire series, that it was, you know, this awful done thing. But in a book that I overall really, really, really like, their handling of this relationship to me stands out as the biggest negative from the book. Nothing to me comes close. Like, even the weakness of maybe the Varric Mako Asami arc early on, and the like abandonment of like Asami as being an important character in the story in book 2, that to me doesn't quite come as close as just the writers, I think, fundamentally getting it wrong with this scene and what they did beforehand. There's so many other ways they could have actually approached the Mako and Korra breakup, and I think it completely ignores the fact that like 6 months passed between book 1 and 2, where seemingly Mako and Korra were together with no real issues that they speak of. They could have they could have used that. They could have just said, we've had a lot of fights over the last 6 months that we've been together, and that would have immediately been like, cool, you've established that this is an ongoing thing. Whereas as it stands in the show, they just kind of clash over Korra getting all these crazy reveals about like the truth about why her life was the way it was up to now, her tribe going to war, her being thrust into her first big, I suppose, political role as the Avatar and struggling with it, and that's why the breakup happens. It just feels like the circumstances around their breakup are just like, there has to be a bit of personal understanding between Mako and Korra over this, that it isn't just we have bad communication because the fate of the world was at stake and we kind of clashed a bit over it. Like, really, come on. And especially given how like they work well as a team. Like, Mako's always there to back up Korra. Korra will defend Mako when she can, and it's just like, what are you actually trying to do here with these two? But yeah, it's a combination of how they handle it, and then especially with Mako, how they do things afterwards, of just like, it to me never worked. But yeah, after that we get into the big speech, and I love this speech. I think it's probably one of my favorite just lengthy quotes from like scenes basically from all of Avatar and Korra. The speech that she gives here is great because in a way you can sort of track Korra's progress by the quality of her speeches. That throughout most of book one, they very much established that there was this weakness of her in front of the media when it came to giving speeches and presenting her position as the Avatar to the world, and she could never get it right, and was always maybe overly confrontational when it came to some of this stuff. She gave a somewhat okay speech, I think, at one point in book one, but here we see her give the perfect speech. She is the one to announce the South being independent now from the North, announcing her father as the chief, and then acknowledging that I've left the portals open, and here's what it's going to mean for the world. I have this hope that the world can become more spiritual, that we can get on, and that, you know, spirits exist in this world, that these two worlds are connected for a reason. I'll be the bridge, I'll still continue my role. It's just that you'll have more direct contact with spirits now, and I hope that I can, you know, make, you know, this dream of true balance in the world between humans and spirits, as well as in the physical world, a reality. And it's fitting that, you know, the Southern Lights are still there, which is this big thing that was accomplished early on in the book, and people, I think, buy into what Korra has to say here. It's just a little bit unfortunate that they really haven't done all that much with this since this point, basically. And that's a pretty major point in the comics right now, that they're kind of maneuvering their way around the topic of human-spirit conflict. But they haven't delved into it properly just yet, in terms of, like, have we really made progress? It seems like at one point we have, and that, like, spirits are living in Republic City okay, there doesn't seem to be too much problems, but then they just like disappear the second anything goes wrong. They come back and there's chaos again with the new spirit portal, and it's just like, when is a big move going to be made? Because it feels like Korra opening the portals was a big move that was meant to lead to other things happening. What is going to be the big thing that, I suppose, fully pays off the magnitude of Korra's decision here? The fact that I think they're really trying to make it Korra's legacy, that she really created this shift where humans and spirits can actually get on. I think that's meant to be one of the key takeaways from Korra's legacy as the Avatar, in the same way that like Aang's legacy was ending this legendary 100-year war and bringing the world towards peace with Republic City, and kind of stopping most like conflict between the different nations. Korra's one, I think, is more meant to be about, you know, stopping specific threats, but also getting humans and spirits to this point, and they still haven't quite got there yet. And I love how it ends on that note of, you know, like, we are entering a new age, and the hint that the harmonic convergence has like changed the planet's energy. Like, something has changed. We haven't discovered it just yet, but we're going to get that reveal at some point. And it is, of course, new airbenders, which is a really, really cool reveal when it happens. It just, it sort of feels a little bit in book 3 like they focus so much on the new airbenders being in the world that they forget about the spiritual kind of thing. Spirits are just like a add-on bonus when I think it should be like the big move. But we'll discuss book 3. We'll get into that. The first book 3 review will be later on in the week, but it will be this week. And we'll get into book 3 and its strengths and weaknesses and so on. I know a lot of people love book 3. Personally, I find it to be the weakest, so it should be pretty fun to go through and talk about where I find it to be weak comparatively, whereas perhaps for some of you watching these, you didn't like book 2 all that much, but you've kind of seen why I like nearly every aspect of book 2, whereas it's fairly hated within the fan base. Yeah, the book ends, and I just have some final thoughts on book 2. I think it's Korra's strongest arc as a character. I know a lot of people really disliked Korra in the early episodes, but I think it's clear to see that if you did dislike Korra's personality in the early episodes, you see very clearly growth as of the last episode. Her giving that speech, this decision with the portals and so on, how she handles things. That's growth. Whereas if you were more understanding of Korra's position, like I was, really getting behind like why she feels this way and siding with her, at least in my opinion, with her reaction to what's going on here, I still saw that growth, but from a different kind of, from a more understanding position. Bolin had his big moment. Mako even got his big moment, even if perhaps the lead up to it, the start of that arc wasn't the best. Varric, I thought, was a very, very solid kind of villain who, like, they surprised you with the reveal that he was behind it all, but it ended up working and making sense for what was going on. Unfortunately, Asami, I think, ends up being like the biggest, I suppose, failure in writing of a character here, in that there was potential, but they ended up just making her like, oh, my company was taken over, reaction to company being taken over, it gets back, and not really playing all that big of a role in anything else. So I think this ends up probably being Asami's weakest book, unfortunately. In that, like, they could have done something with her here that would really have helped her in book 3 and 4 to make herself come across a little better as a character. Yeah, the early episodes being very focused on family. I really enjoyed getting to see Korra interact with her father a bit more, with her mother. Those family scenes were very well done. On the Tenzin side of things, him interacting with his kids, him interacting with his siblings, and while they didn't, I suppose, give the siblings or his kids overly huge arcs outside of Jinora, it still worked in that you got to know Kaya more, you got to know Bumi more, you got a little insight into Iki from that really nice kind of Bison Tea Party scene, you got a little insight into Milo from his episode, and Jinora especially jumps into like the, you know, that kind of transition point between minor character and main character of like, she's now important because of what she's done here. And they did that so well of just making her Korra's spiritual guide. She has this amazing ability with spirits to the point where she actually assisted in the final battle. She didn't actively like really like fight or anything like that, but she just allowed Korra the ability to, you know, win that fight. Without her, it probably wouldn't have happened. And that's a really huge thing, and it sets up her arc, Janora's arc in book 3 very well, of like, she's already done something so impressive, and, you know, but now we're going to see, is he going to, in a way, allow Jinora to be free enough to like fulfill her potential in a way. So I love book 2, the early stuff with the family, the later stuff with the spirits, the lore, the mechanics, how well explained everything is and how well it fits into continuity. I think it's a weird one where the writers got it so right on some things, but then on a couple of little things they just got it so wrong. But that's my review for Light in the Dark. That's the end of Book 2 Spirit. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this episode. Your final thoughts on Book 2 now that we're through it all. But yeah, that's been the review. Thanks for watching, and bye.